Hello, I'm Jonathan Mast, and welcome to this edition of the Sedgwick Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about escape of water claims, or EOW, as it's known in the industry. And we've got two of our leading experts here to talk with us. Ian McLennan, Director, Head of Commercial Repair Solutions for Sedgwick, and Ady Hall, Client Director for Sedgwick. Gentlemen, thank you both for being with us today.
Hi, good afternoon, Jonathan.
Well, I know that for your segment, obviously people know what EOW is, but we have a lot of people that listen each week that might not know about escape of water claims and why it's important. And so that kind of leads into our first question. We'll start with you, Ian, how do escape of water claims impact housing associations? And then just give us a brief overview of EOW, and then we'll go over to you, Ady.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. So, escape of water, obviously, shortened to EOW in the UK claims industry. It's really the escape of water from any plumbing apparatus. So, we're talking mainly showers for the housing associations, especially showers, toilets, heating pipes, cold water supply pipes to sinks, toilets, bathrooms. So these are the things that regularly leak, and to some extent or other can damage the fabric of the property. So we're talking about plaster walls, plaster ceilings, floors, internal doors, internal skirtings, internal finishes, kitchens, bathrooms. So when we talk about escape of water, especially for housing associations, it is one of the main claims that we would come across on a daily basis. And my role within the company is to run the building aspect of our Sedgwick Repair services, and we provide the repair option to our clients, housing associations and local councils. Ady?
Yeah, thank you, guys. Yeah, I'm Ady Hall, the Client Director for the Public Sector team within Sedgwick. So I work very closely with Ian and his colleagues in ensuring that all our public sector clients, not just housing associations, because many local authorities, councils also have responsibility for housing stock as well, and it very much applies to them. I think that the headline thing here for me is that, the recent ABI figures that came out in relation to escape of water claims, they're tracking nearly 2 million, 1.8 million's worth of claims are reported every day. And that excludes, obviously, the claims that aren't reported. So you could probably add some on for that as well. So we're talking big numbers here for the market. It's been an ongoing issue as long as I can remember. I've been in the insurance world most of my adult life, and for the last 20 years involved with public sector organisations. And there's no doubt about it, escape of water claims is one of the major perils that sits on their claims experience, alongside fire and floods, but they tend to be bigger events that don't happen as often, but certainly in escape of EOW claims, escape of water claims, it's the scourge of their claims experience. Spikes also have increased significantly since 2020, and whether that's a coincidence or not, that's very much in line with when most of the UK went down into lockdown in relation to COVID. So one of the thoughts is there was probably more people, or there definitely was more people at home, and they were either noticing these small leaks that hadn't been monitored before, they didn't even know they were there, and some of them, bless them, were even trying to look at their own DIY, trying to fix it themselves, and unfortunately the D in DIY became destroy it yourself instead of do it yourself. So that led to many more claims, accidental damage claims as well. So Ian mentioned earlier about the apparatus that are included for burst pipe claims, escape of water claims, which could be, anything basically that links to water. But one of the other things that many housing associations and certainly many local authorities, especially those that have leaseholder policies as well, will be very conscious that if there's an apartment, i.e. multi-storey residentials, it just doesn't stop at one apartment sometimes. Sometimes these claims are of huge size because numerous properties have been affected by the drip effect going down one property and sometimes two. So it's a big issue. The nut hasn't been cracked yet on how to deal with these, but one thing is for certain is some of the organisations are now beginning to feel it with their insurance premiums. But it's not just the insurance premiums either, is it, Ian? There's lots of other stuff as well that falls into this.
Yeah, it's a good point, Ady, about COVID. COVID changed everyone's life to some extent or other, and it lasted a lot longer than we thought it was. In the UK specifically, I know it affected different countries around the world differently, but in the UK, our government imposed 3 separate lockdowns. The first lockdown lasted from March 2020 to the end of October. With another small lockdown took us up towards Christmas of 30 days roughly, and then there was a third lockdown that took us right through to the summer of 2021. So we were locked down on and off for long periods. And one of the things that happened from that was, and Ady makes a good point, that the housing associations and councils couldn't, in various restrictions, couldn't send their staff out to check properties. So if properties were leaking, what happened was that they continued to leak, and they weren't actually identified early on. So there was a lot more damage arose from those type of incidents. And that, to some extent, is still ongoing because people's working patterns have changed. People work from home quite a lot more now. There's not the same rigour, I would say, in terms of people being in the office and following the structure of visits to site that there probably was before COVID. We got another thing of alternative accommodation. There's a lot less rental accommodation around now. There's a number of social factors that feed into this. There's the population is ageing, and the population in the UK is getting older. So what inevitably happens there is there's more single people occupying properties. There's also quite a high net migration figure into the UK. I think it was 800,000 last year, more came into the UK than left the UK. So all these people need somewhere to live. And it pushes the rental market up, especially around London. Rent increases are spiralling, and landlords have been more selective in respect of who they allow into the properties. This obviously leads to higher alternative accommodation costs whenever we have to put people up whose properties have been damaged to the extent that they can't live in them. So all this feeds into higher costs for our clients, higher costs for the insurers. Leading into this, the costs of materials are also up. We calculate 25% between 2021 and 2022. Inflation is still high as we go into 2023. There's a number of factors that went into this. We'll all remember the Suez. We might remember it more in Europe than they might in the US, but the Suez was blocked by a ship which turned sideways and blocked the whole Suez Canal, which meant that goods could not travel from Asia into Europe. This caused a huge blockage in the movement of goods. COVID also contributed to that. So the cost of materials went up and is still rising in the UK and the rest of Europe. Rebuild costs were up 19% in the same period. Ady, you could probably come back in on clean eviction management. This is something that you've probably seen in your days in the public sector.
Thanks, Ian. And many of the clients listening to this will be familiar with this. You know, all those things that we've spoken about already. It's also not uncommon that once a housing association or a local authority has finally reached the end of the road with a tenant, i.e. done everything that they can do to keep them in their home, when eviction is necessary, unfortunately, it's not uncommon for a disgruntled evicted tenant to leave the housing association or the local authority with a parting gift of either leaving a running tap, overflowing in a bath or a sink. Unfortunately, some have set a house on fire as well. My point is all these things all sit on the claims experience, which ultimately finds its way to the insurance premiums.
Well, thanks for the great overview. If you both want to weigh in on this on the next question, what can a housing association expect if their claims experience is poor in relation to these types of claims? And whoever wants to go first, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go first with that. Thanks, Jonathan. It could be a number of things, really, from higher deductibles or excesses, depending on the size of them. Many insurance companies now have higher excesses specifically for escape of water claims. You might have them different from all the other insurance perils, but higher, usually £100 or £200 for most household policies, and these are very similar. Just to try and claw some of the money back, or to focus the mind a little bit for the tenants, to let them know that if this does happen, you might have to pay a little bit more. So with the hope that general maintenance will be stayed on top on. Certainly higher premiums. A lot of the business that we're talking about have a common renewal day, not all, but very common renewal date of the 1st of April, mainly because that's the close off and the start of the new financial year in the UK. And, I've been through many, many spikes and peaks, as we call them, over the years around April time. But it's fair to say that this year's, speaking to many of my friends and colleagues that still work at insurance companies or brokers, this year, certainly for housing associations or housing stock, has been one of the worst. Not just because insurers are trying to claw back some of the money that they constantly lose in year on year. It's a pound swapping exercise at best for these kind of claims. But more importantly, there's been some markets, some insurers that have literally pulled out of this kind of cover or these kind of risks, or a certain subsegment within the housing associations, which causes even more problems. And as you know, the money that we're dealing with tends to be public money or not-for-profit money that's reinvested back into the business. So any impacts on budgets, whether that's coming from a risk management fund or an insurance premium, has huge ramifications across all the other departments as well. They might not have planned for it. They might not have budgeted it. Insurers will try to be as flexible as they can when it comes to premiums, but they've still got a job to do. They've got to earn money. Profit shouldn't be a dirty word in the insurance world, because if there wasn't profit, they won't be able to pay claims and reinvest in other technologies. So, your worst case scenario is these higher premiums are taking money away from other departments which are already pushed and strapped for cash as such in the first place. There's been a couple of instances also where some insurers have had to ad hocly remove cover altogether, either for escape of water claims or flood if an organisation's housing stock is situated near or close to a river. So they've had to look for completely different ways, or in worst case scenario is self-insuring these kind of risks, which again has the same impact on their budgets as I mentioned earlier. And also, let's not hide the fact that because they are public entities, angry tenants will complain very quickly and usually speak to the media. Often it's the local press, but sometimes some of these claims do find their way more nationally, which impacts the reputation of these organisations. From my experience, there's always two sides to the story, and very occasionally the insurers have dealt with a claim poorly, but usually it's a different story. But either way, the story's out there and the reputation's broken, and they've got a lot of work to come up with it. I think, Ian, you mentioned the labour costs earlier, that increasing.
Yeah. I mean, I can totally agree in terms of the reputation. We see it quite often in the British press that a tenant will claim that the landlord has completely ignored them, and they'll have mushrooms growing out of their ceiling, or they'll have damp patches in their bathrooms or in their living rooms, and they will certainly put across the opinion that the landlord has not supported them. We often see the other side of this, in that, and there's many different reasons for it, and it's not a question of blame here, but it's a question of fairness. And often our social housing clients and insurers are trying their best to help people who are, in some instances, not really able to help themselves. So one big example of this is drying clothes inside without windows open. It causes condensation, it causes mould, it causes damage to the buildings. Our clients and housing associations in general cannot stop people drying their clothes inside. They just can't. So a lot of the time when you see these representations in the press of people claiming to be ill or claiming to be badly let down by the housing association, if you actually looked at the file itself, you would see that the housing association on numerous occasions has tried to access the property, tried to undertake works, tried to help. Don't get me wrong, the housing associations aren't perfect either, but I think from what I've seen, there's often a sort of imbalance in the press in terms of reporting these as bigger sort of dereliction of duty than is the case. And that leads on to the point, the next point that I wanted to talk about, which was disrepair claims. Disrepair claims is a UK legislation that is meant, again, in all the best ways to protect tenants from rogue landlords who don't undertake repairs to properties in a timely fashion. So not only does it enforce a legal obligation on the landlord to undertake the repair, it also provides damages to the tenant. So these are a punitive damage against the landlord, which is paid to the tenant directly. So it could be 7,500, could be 10,000, could be £15,000, depending on the severity of the damage. And what this leads to is, we'll probably all see with posters around the US and UK for slips and trips and car accidents where unscrupulous solicitors look to what we call in the UK claim farm, which means they're looking for people to make claims against the landlords, often with not much backing to it, but they're looking for people to make these claims, and it's definitely growing in the UK. It's potential fraud, potential for people to make a lot of money. We actually had a very interesting anomaly, you could call it, in the UK 2015, 2016, where people in the UK like to go to Spain or Turkey or these type of hot European countries, much like people in the north of the US might go down to Miami or the Caribbean islands. What was happening at that point was that people were claiming that they were being given food poisoning by the all-inclusive resorts. And it's a very similar bandwagon that people jumped on. They were actually getting the holidays paid, and they were getting £10,000, £15,000 in compensation. And it strikes me as a very similar, sort of category of a catalogue of events as what's happening with disrepair. The way that we shut that down in 2015, 2016 was that we actually took a couple of these people to court and proved that they were fraudulently, exaggerating their food poisoning. And one of the unfortunate couples towards the end of this sort of spate of claims was actually jailed for 15 months. Now, I'm not suggesting in any ways that any of our disrepair tenants are heading that way, but it's certainly I don't know what you think, Ady, but it's gathering momentum in disrepair aspects of housing associations and councils.
Yeah, I agree. And there's conversations that I hear on a too often basis of unscrupulous solicitors targeting well-known housing estates, whether that's local authority estates or housing association estates, and literally door knocking now, encouraging people to make these kind of claims. And as you say, yes, there is a lot of money to be made, but very little of that finds its way to the tenants. Unfortunately, for the genuine claims also, it means that some claims may be slowed down slightly while we make sure that there are no red flags on any of these claims.
Yeah. So, and I think obviously, it leads back into the fact that any claim, that makes its way through to an insurance claim is going to have these higher material and labour costs and alternative accommodation costs attaching. So the question is, what kind of housing association expect if the claims experience is poor? But it's really going to ramp up the costs that sit against their policy.
Yeah. So there are no winners in this respect, which probably will lead us on to the last question.
Yeah, great explanation there. And so I think that leads us to how can a housing association manager, start over. That was a great explanation. And as we look at the last piece here, how can a housing association manage or mitigate escape of water claims?
Well, good question, Jonathan. And I think the obvious thing is to either ramp up, certainly continue, or look at their own inspection maintenance regimes. You can get a lot of trends from the data, from the claims experience that you have into escape of water claims, not just how many you're having and how much insurers are paying. But once you start interrogating your own data, you can look for the trends, i.e., is it faulty workmanship? If so, is it the same builder or the same plumber that we're using on a block, where they've used either the wrong materials? And if that's the case, then there is a potential recovery in place there from their public liability insurance. Did that plumber, or if they've got their own direct labour organisation, are they using some faulty parts? Are the parts that they're using now still fit for purpose? Technology changes, materials change all the time, ways of working change all the time. Smart homes are becoming more and more popular within houses, and insurers are encouraging those as well. So, but the inspection maintenance regimes is the absolute crucial one, and that is, whatever the times, making sure, particularly on the older properties, or particularly on the properties that have been or are susceptible to these kind of claims, is make sure that you've got boots on the ground and you've got people just visiting, quick knock on the door, just here to check your pipes, everything's okay. Sometimes that can make a difference. Sometimes it's the difference between catching it early. And another thing our clients can do, we mentioned earlier on how it impacts the budget, is really to stay on top of their own claims experience. And if they do see peaks and troughs in relation to escape of water claims, stay in touch with your insurers and your brokers and the loss adjusters that you have arrangements with as well. Because what you don't want is any shocks and surprises a few months before your renewal to find out that your premium going up. And in the wider budgeting sense, which is usually closed off, 3-6 months way in advance of the insurance renewal for obvious reasons, you don't want to be going to your chief financial officer asking for more money because you didn't see this one coming. So have regular updates, have regular meetings. Many of the insurers who offer this kind of cover will offer support in relation to risk management advice, surveying assistance, all of that stuff. So make the most of it. But to me, one of the key things that you can do is just look at the data that's in front of you and look for trends. Once you start digging and once you start looking, certain things will jump out and they could be headed off at the pass fairly quickly.
Yeah, I agree, Ady, and I think one of the points you made there about early notification of claims, we've just went through a winter surge in the UK, which was caused by cold weather in December 22. Thousands of claims for escape of water caused by frozen pipes. So basically, the old Victorian way of building properties in the UK was they have copper pipes. Most now are plastic pipes, but regardless of the pipe's construction, the water freezes in the pipe expands, the pipe cracks. When the water thaws in the pipe, we have significant escape of waters, we have significant damage to properties. And the difference between getting in quickly and getting these properties dry quickly, and the difference between leaving them for a longer period of time is significant. If you think about it, mid-December, 2022, a pipe expands, bursts, and causes damage to property. We really want to be in there before the end of November, drying the property. We want to strip out affected materials where necessary. We want to heat the property to a certain extent, and we want to begin the process of reinstating it. What happens sometimes is we don't see these properties until sometimes months later, and the damage multiplies significantly. We're talking maybe like a £15,000-20,000 UK loss could turn into no exaggeration, 10 times as much if we don't get in there quickly. And it's always a question of, who, what, when. Who needs to identify that? Who do they need to tell? And when do they tell it? And the quicker these things happen, the better. All the way through any life cycle of any escape of water claim, there is opportunities for claims to slip. Whether the trades don't turn up, whether access isn't granted, whether something isn't dried properly, whether something has to be redone. There's so many steps in the chain, milestones in the journey where the claim can go wrong, and it can extend both the duration of the claim and the cost of the claim. So it's really a question of everybody being clear of their duties, the clients, the insurers, the loss adjusters, all being clear of their duties, who does what and when. And I think that's really, really important in this. It's absolutely sort of heartbreaking to see people out their properties and out their properties for longer than they need to be because of what are unmanageable communication issues, and it usually does come down to communication, poor communication between the housing association internally, poor communication between the insurers and the loss adjusters. There's loads of different reasons why these claims go on further than they should. But that's our job in working with our clients to improve that. The other thing that sort of leads into that is general risk improvements. Talk about leak bots, which is a fairly new technology. It's not really taken on that much. But the idea there is that you might have a pipe which in a normal household would only run water for, you might be filling the kettle. The biggest thing you might be doing on a daily basis is having a shower or having a bath. What these leak bots, as they're called, they monitor the flow of water. And if the water flows for longer than it should, then they shut the water off automatically. And this potentially can stop larger scale claims from occurring. So you think about it, if you've got a burst pipe, a fractured pipe in a loft space of a property, it can run literally for days if no one identifies it and no one calls it in. Whereas these things, if they see water running for longer than it should, maybe 20 minutes, 15 minutes, they'll automatically cap off the water and stop that additional damage. Other things like one of our clients might ask us to look at resilience, which is the idea of putting materials back in a more resilient format. So it might be that you change the plaster finish on the walls from plaster boards, which doesn't really react to water that well, to a sort of harder finish, which can just be dried if the property gets wet. Other things like electrics. In terms of where electrics are placed, it can make a big difference in terms of what you need to strip out. So there's ways of building properties or reinstating properties that actually limit the potential for future damage. And I think that's a very important issue going forward, especially with huge environmental concerns going forward. Everyone's going to be measured on their environmental footprint going forward. And I think the idea there is that if we can limit the amount of strip out that needs to be undertaken, sometimes properties are stripped out to ceiling height when they don't need to be. So what we do in the UK with our resilience offering is we try and take a step back and say, look, does this necessarily all have to be stripped out? Can we save any of these materials? It works two ways. It shortens the reinstatement, but it also, if you look at filling skips full of waste which is going to landfill, nobody wants that. And if it can be avoided, then that's in everyone's interest. So that's some of the stuff that we're trying to do and working with our partner clients to mitigate these losses and stop the severity of them when they do occur.
Well, I think before we go, you guys have both given lots of great information. There's lots to know, lots to follow up on. And certainly at Sedgwick, with our expertise and a strong team of colleagues out there to help, if people want to know more, need to reach out, would you both mind providing the best course of action for someone to seek help?
Yeah, sure. From my perspective, just reach out to me. You'll be able to get me on LinkedIn, or if you're already in communication with me anyway, just reach out to me and we can have a conversation. We work with most of the major insurers and brokers that deal with this kind of cover for housing associations and local authorities. In fact, we deal with all of them. So we can arrange a gathering to talk this through. But I just want to stress again, just keep looking at your own claims experience each month, each week. And if you do that, you'll find the trends pretty much straight away, and that'll probably be a good time to reach out to us also.
Yeah, I was just back up Ady and everything you said there. We're happy to speak to any of our clients about any concerns they might have about their maintenance regimes, or about how much they're paying for particular trades or particular materials. We do a monthly report on building costs, materials and trades, and we benchmark ourselves against the UK market. So if anybody wants to check what they're spending on particular trades or what they think something should cost, then feel free to reach out to myself or Ady.
Well, thank you both again for your time and your expertise. We'll have all the pertinent information also in our podcast description wherever you're finding your podcast at. And so thanks everyone for listening today, and until next time, have a great week.